Hello, my name is Gary Mansfield, and this is the Ministry of Arts podcast, where each week I'll be speaking to a different artist. Now let's begin by bagging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello, and welcome to episode 240 of the Ministry of Arts podcast. Firstly, as ever, thank you very much to our Patreon supporters and those of you that have bought the merch from our merch shop. If you'd like to support the podcast, go over to the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile. You'll see a drop-down Linktree box and you can do so from there. Well, in today's episode, I'm taking you to meet performance artist Martin O'Brien. Martin has had a trilogy of performances at the Whitechapel Gallery this year. I attended the second, which was, I think it was in July, and it was quite an intense and mesmerising experience. The final part of this trilogy is going to be on the 14th of December at the Whitechapel Gallery from 11 AM till 9 PM. And the Whitechapel Gallery says, drawing inspiration from hospital radio and stories of ghosts heard through analogue technologies, the final installation of Martin O'Brien's trilogy explores the human desire to communicate and record. In a strange and eerie landscape, O'Brien shuffles around, recording and playing half-heard voices and unholy sound. The durational performance installation is open throughout the day from 11 AM till 9 PM. I loved recording this episode. I'd not met Martin before, and going by the performance I saw in July, I thought he'd be quite a serious person, but it was quite the opposite. And at one point, we was laughing like drunkards. And on the flip side to that, there was some quite serious chat about Martin's life-limiting illness, which he refers to living in the present as being in a zombie state. But this is definitely a conversation that touches all the emotions, and I'm sure you'll love it. So please come with me as I spoke to performance artist and bona fide zombie, Martin O'Brien. How are you, mate? Are you good?
Yeah, I am. How are you?
Oh, splendid. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thanks so much for doing it. Can't wait.
You're more than welcome. Can I ask what those two bits are behind you?
The statue of Jesus.
I figured it was. I saw just a little back of the cross there.
Yeah, well, I was a Catholic boy, but I still love all of those. So I'm not now, but I an arrow. It lights up. Yeah.
Brilliant. I thought it'd be pointing down at the at
Jesus
with his burden.
Yeah. The other day, my friend gave it to me after a performance, and I brought it home, and my boyfriend went, "That's not staying in the house."
Is he just not religious or anti-religious?
It's just doesn't like tacky things, basically.
Brilliant. Well, I do have 7 questions that I ask each guest. And the first being, how would you explain what you do to someone that may not know your work?
Well, I would say, because I do get asked a lot by people, what do you do? And, I'm in different sorts of worlds, not always in art. So, and I have to tell them. So I usually start by saying the work that I make is performances that deals with death, dying, mortality. And so it takes as its starting point me as someone with cystic fibrosis, the last shortening disease I was born with. But the work isn't really about having cystic fibrosis.
Yeah.
You don't find anything out about my life from coming to the performances. It's not really autobiographical, but it just explores the themes, the ideas, the kind of images that are conjured up by disease and death and mortality. It tries to think more widely about sort of political or philosophical implications of being born with a life-shortening disease and living longer than you expected to.
Yeah.
And it does use the stuff of cystic fibrosis as the materials, breathing and breath restriction, mucus as a material, the things that the disease does to the body are sort of revealed in the performances.
Does it affect you on a daily basis?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I take a lot of medication to try to keep everything obey, but I have, bad lungs, very bad digestive system.
Yeah.
CF sort of blocks a lot of your vital organs with mucus. That's what the disease is. And mucus gets extra kind of thick and sticky.
Yeah.
Whereas in your body, for example, mucus would act as a lubrication inside your body for things to move through. In mine, it's too sticky, so it acts as a blockage instead of a lubrication.
Yeah. And has it affected you? I know you've had it all your life, obviously, but has it affected you all of your life to that extent, or has it gradually got worse as you've got older?
No, it has. When I was a kid, it was pretty bad. I was in and out of hospital all the time,
Yeah.
really, as a child. A couple of weeks in, a few months out, a couple of weeks in, a few months out. 'Cause you just pick up infections, chest
Yeah.
infections, and it
Yeah.
like wipes you out. But my parents discovered it because I was 6 weeks old when I was diagnosed and I was a baby. And I was eating so much, but just losing weight, and
Wow.
crying constantly, hungry,
Yeah.
and they were just feeding me, and I was losing weight. And I was the first kid, so they just thought that's what it's like having a baby. Eventually, they took, after a few weeks of this, they took me to the doctor, and the doctor said, "What are you feeding him? 'Cause he's so skinny." And they said everything, and they were like, "What?
Yeah.
Babies
Yeah.
don't eat that much either." So then, all right, something's wrong. They do all the tests, but because it's genetic, they there's a cousin of mine over in Ireland, and he had cystic fibrosis, and so they went, okay,
Yeah.
it's possible that it
And
could be that.
I don't mean to, for this to be a conversation about that illness,
That's
but
okay.
I need to ask you a question because I don't know the answer. You was
It
eating a
was,
lot
yeah.
as a child, but nothing was happening. What is it that disease does internally with the food?
Yeah, so the way it affects the pancreas is that it blocks the sort of tubes in it, so the pancreas can't produce the enzymes. The enzymes don't get through,
Yeah.
so you can eat as much as you want, but
It takes no
don't get
nutrients
anything
from
it. No, you
Yeah.
just go to the toilet. So I take these tablets when I eat now, which they've got enzymes in them basically that digest the food. If I don't take these, if I forget to take them out with me and eat something, the next day is going to be hell.
Yeah. And as you can see, I don't have that problem. Everything I eat just triples the calorie count, I think.
Well, I joke with people, the good thing about having cystic fibrosis is that I could never put any weight on. A lot of my mates are jealous of me because
I nearly said brilliant then, but it's so
there's an upside to everything. Yeah.
If there's a positive to come out of it, let's grab hold of it with both hands.
I can eat as many crisps as I want, fatty food as I want.
Yeah, there's people scratching at their headphones.
Exactly, everybody wants it.
Was there creativity in the home growing up, Martin?
No, it wasn't. No, not at all. We just, like a working class family from Burnley. My mum worked she had a few different jobs, but in an office, and then Marks and Spencer's cafe later. My dad's always worked in a factory for the same company. It was just, we're never into art. We're into sport, and we're big Burnley Football Club fans, which I still am. But so we had that, but never any art or creativity or theatre or performance or anything. But when I was a kid, I was, a kind of exhibitionist, and somebody 2 doors down from my grandma worked at the local youth theatre, and my mum and dad went, "Oh, let's talk to him because Martin is kind of a little bit out there,
full on." Yeah.
So he said,
the skinny kid at number 38.
Yeah, exactly. He's always like singing to everyone. Yeah. So that's how it started, and so they took me when I was 7. They chatted with him, and I went to the local youth theatre. And we just hooked him on performing.
And where do you think that came from? If it wasn't genetic, if you like, do you think it was just trying to get noticed?
Maybe, yeah. And I've always loved the people watching me and joking with people and being the center of attention. Is something I always really enjoyed. So I used to put on little shows in my grandma's spare room, for the family.
Brilliant.
And all that kind of thing, and force the local kids to be in it. These plays I would write, which would, I've still got that. My grandma still has all the scripts that I wrote, handwritten. Just feel like I come alive in front of an audience. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And when did you start using it as an art form?
Yeah, I'd say much later, because through my teens I was basically my life was the youth theatre. And then I went to, when I was 18, to a experimental arts college, Dartington College of Arts, down in Devon. You know, for university, I went there because my teacher at college had sort of said, "Oh, I think this place might suit you."
What was it called?
It's called Dartington College of Art.
You're the third person we've had on who went to Dartington. And it's, everyone has said it's just such a small place, but everyone wanted to go there.
Yes, everyone wanted to go. And I think, you know, there's like the lineage of that and the history of the artists that came through there in the 70s. When you look now, and I still meet people, you know, around in the art scene. Oh, you went to, you know, when did you go? I was there 1979. Oh, I was there 1980. I was there 2000. You know, it's just, brilliant. You meet all these people. It's fantastic.
Well, Pauline Amos was one of them. Do you know Pauline Amos?
I've heard the name, yeah.
She's worth a look. She's sort of, she's a painter, but with a bit of performance. And the other one didn't quite go there. Well, not officially, but he used to go there anyway because he lived in the area and he was arty. And that was Jimmy Courtey from KLF.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, amazing.
So yeah, Pauline Amos is worth a look.
That's great. Yeah.
But, yeah, sorry to butt in. So yeah,
no, I mean, that was an incredible place. And you know, I was there at the latter stages because of course it's closed down now. But I was there 2005 to 8.
Nice.
And I think it closed down 2010 or 11. So I was really near the end.
Yeah.
You know, being there and in that sort of atmosphere and these artists, and that, you know, that's when it came out as well. And I think it's the classic story in a way. You go there and it changes everything.
It's like going to fame.
Exactly.
Now, how did you find, Martin, being the centre of attention at home, but then going to Dartington where everyone's the centre of attention?
No, that was strange because you go from very easily all eyes on you to all of a sudden, oh, there's all these people coming from different places and they've all got quite, you know, a lot of shy people there as well, but there are, you know, there were a lot of big personalities there. But I found my own sort of place in it.
Yeah. I mean, everyone finds up finding their little niche, but first of all, getting there. I mean, I don't know if you know about my background being in prison, but it's like going into a new prison, you know. You walk in there and there's all of these, there's tough nuts, there's, you know, normal people, nice people even, but you've got to find your niche in this, in this new building full of likewise people.
And how did you do that?
I was a big aggressive bloke. I just done it, you know.
You just did it,
I'm not that anymore. Well, I'm still big, but I'm not aggressive. And anyone who says different, I'll give them a right hander. No, but I was a different person then, mate.
Yes, find your sort of way in it. But you know, something sort of amazing happened then because it was performance, but I suppose, you know, I was there and I wanted to experiment and make sort of experimental performance. I'd come to terms with that before I went to Dartington, but I didn't really know that I was going to be doing solo things. I had this image of joining a sort of experimental theatre company and being in that sort of world.
Yeah.
There was a big moment where I was looking through a book called The Artist's Body. And the book is really interesting because it's a whole series of photographs of different performances and different other kind of visual artworks where the body of the artist is the kind of center of the work. And next to each photograph, there's a short description of the work. So it's very thick and it's like a catalogue of stuff that's happened. And I just flicked along and I came across an image which was a male groin. It's like a close-up of a male groin where the skin of the scrotum was wrapped around the penis and sewn together, so there was no penis. And 2 nails were like hammered through the edges of it, attaching it to a plank of wood. And I went, that was my reaction. You know, at 18 I was, what the hell is this? And I read the description and it said, artist Bob Flanagan had cystic fibrosis and made this art. He also had a full-time BDSM relationship with his partner Sheree Rose, and they made this art together that explored love and loss and pain and illness through BDSM. And I was just, you know, my jaw hit the floor because I thought, one of the things with cystic fibrosis is, I don't know if you know about this, that we're people who have the disease, we can't be in the same room as each other.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
I'm like that with my wife.
Yeah.
sorry. Go on. Sorry about it there. Fucking hell. Talk about putting an handbrake on a conversation.
That just got me. I don't know why it tickled me so much.
And take two.
Oh. Yeah, we can't be in the same room as each. Now every time I tell that, I'm just going to think of you and your wife.
I'm sorry. Go on. So you can't be in the same room as each other.
We can't be in the same room as each other, and if we're outdoors, we've got to be 6 feet apart. So it's like social distancing.
And what's the reason for that, Martin?
So that we, with CF, we grow a lot of different bugs and bacteria in our lungs. And, we could pass it on to each other and it wouldn't affect you. It doesn't really matter. They're not going to live in your chest because the mucus isn't so thick and stuck in your lungs. But someone else with cystic fibrosis, if we're in the room together and we're both growing different things in our lungs, we'll pass it on to each other. So it could be, if they have something really bad, I would easily get it. And, and it's going to be really bad for me. So to try and avoid cross-infection. But that's only really been discovered over the last 20 or so years. Cross-infection thing. So when I was a kid, I would hang out with the other CF kids in the hospital. But as I got into my later teens, that's when they started to discover cross-infection and split us all up. Yeah, so at that point, you're like basically stripped of community. There's online things, but at that point, I was not online. I didn't have the internet, so there was no, like I didn't know anybody else with CF basically. Yeah. So you see this image in the book and read this thing about someone else's fibrosis and go, there are other people. And you go, making performance and making art around illness. And it's like a light bulb moment. Why never think that art is a place to explore these things? Yeah. So that, that was a big turning point.
And it makes you feel like you're not alone, doesn't it? There is times when you do feel like a fucking island. And then when you see someone sailing past who's got similar footsteps to you,
it's beautiful. Those moments are so amazing where you sort of interact with that. And of course, since then I have gone on to meet Sheree, who was Bob's partner. Bob died in the mid-90s. We've done a lot of performances and collaborations together. The other big moment of sort of launching into the sort of stuff that I do, or figuring out that this is a sort of art form, was after Dartington. So I'd started making some solo performances, but a little bit, tentatively kind of making things, but hadn't really figured out what my language was and what everything was really, and what I should do. But alongside that, I got this job in Poland at a theatre company called Godźnica, the Theatre Association of Godźnica, who was sort of experimental physical theatre company in Poland. And it's a little village, and most of the performers sort of live in the village. You spend the whole days training and the nights rehearsing. Wow. And it's kind of like your monks, it's a bit like a cult. And, the director is very tyrannical. And he works you so hard. It's so physically demanding. And we used to do these performances in the village and also tour them in different places in Europe. I wasn't living full time. I would go back. Yeah. And I remember one day we're doing this performance, and I was so desperate to cough during the performance, and just holding it. And I thought, if I start coughing, it breaks the image. Just hold it. Because, and then I get off stage and I just cough, and mucus just pours out of my mouth. And I don't have a tissue. I just go on stage, and so I'm catching it all. I've got all this phlegm in my hands. I remember this moment, sort of standing there, looking at the phlegm in my hands, thinking, "Oh my God, this is what I want to be doing out there, not backstage. There's the politic. This has got to be out there being shown." And that was the other light bulb moment of, fuck yeah, I've got to actually make work that uses these materials of disease, that puts that out in front of people.
Brilliant.
Not the dirty little secret. It's got to be the thing that the work's doing.
Yeah. And did you find that through lockdown, when people were dealing, well, when COVID was in the news, that your work, or people understood your work anymore because of, you know, the social distancing, the masks, breathing difficulties?
Yeah, there was a whole thing around the sort of online CF things where it's like, the people are starting to
welcome to our world.
Welcome to our world. Yeah. It's true. And when it first started happening, my friend Sheree, who's Bob's partner, called me at the beginning of the lockdowns, and she said, "Oh, Martin, it's like the whole world has caught cystic fibrosis."
Brilliant.
And I thought, in a way, I wrote a little essay about it actually, about that sort of cross infection and CF and COVID and what it means to touch and breathe the air with other people.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I was supposed to be making a performance that was called the Last Breath Society Coffin, like coughing as in coffin as it is in the thing that you're buried in. It was to be at the ICA, and it was supposed to happen March time, which was the beginning of the lockdowns.
Yeah.
So it was cancelled and postponed for a year and a half or whatever it was. When it started to come back, all of a sudden the meaning of it had shifted, because the idea was the opening image, which was conceived of like a good year before anybody had ever heard of COVID.
Yeah.
Was a series of coffins laid out in the space with tape recorders in them and the sounds of coughs coming out of them.
Yeah.
And that's the opening image of the work. And then, oh my God, all of a sudden coffins and coughing, just like the cultural meaning shifted.
Yeah.
So people came to this work. It's the first thing they saw out of COVID, because it was right at the beginning of everybody coming out again. Everybody in the audience is masked up still. They're all coming into this room filled with coffins and coughs everywhere, and me hacking up phlegm and doing all sorts of stuff with it, and everybody's going, ugh. It's like processing what had just happened. So that was really interesting. The work took on a new meaning and a new significance.
Yeah, it's funny how different perspectives can adjust a piece of work entirely.
Yeah, totally. Because it felt like it was just the next stage of my practice to me.
Yeah.
But then, I understood, oh my God, as I was beginning, this is doing something different now. This is like doing something.
I mean, all artists are aware that as soon as they put their artwork out on public display, your narrative is secondary to the viewer. If it takes on a whole different language, and especially if a media gets hold of it and speaks that new language, all of a sudden that artwork isn't what you intended it to be. It is now and forever something completely different.
Totally, yeah. And because I teach as well, and I always say to my students, the audience or the spectators or the viewers of your work are not detectives trying to figure out what you mean. They're going to read it themselves. The meaning happens somewhere like between you and them, and they figure out what it means for them.
You
can control what certain things of the work, but you can't control what it's going to mean for someone else.
No. And you said that it was when you had a handful of phlegm that you had that light bulb moment. Did that change the way that you was writing your performance?
Yeah, that changed everything about the way I sort of conceived what my performances were.
Brilliant. I love them moments.
But I know it's so good in that. Oh, why did it take this to figure it out?
Exactly. Something so simple, so obvious.
Something
that's there on a daily basis, more or less.
Exactly. Yeah.
It just takes you to catch up with your subconscious, doesn't it?
Totally. And I'm going, oh yeah, I think before that I'd started to make these performances that were sort of used endurance and they were durational things, but I didn't really conceive of like what was specific about my body. I was just like, okay, well, I'm just a stand-in for another body, which obviously you can't really be. And it sort of became like, oh no, there's something like very specific about my body, which is that it's diseased and it's like, you know, not living longer than it was expected to. Maybe not at that point, but now. And there's something actually through that experience that I can say that feels important that people might want to hear around mortality, around death, around our feelings about life and death, and that weird position that we're all in different ways.
Most members of society are trying not to think about mortality at all, but people who are faced with it, it's a different kettle of fish altogether, isn't it?
Definitely. And then as I started to get towards 30, because growing up I was sure I would die when I was 30. That was the thing, because that was the average life expectancy of someone with cystic fibrosis. Growing up, that was plastered everywhere and on all the charity appeals. There'd be like a cute
That's
child.
Nice. That's lovely to see, isn't it? As you're
I know,
walking down the street. Oh, cheers,
exactly.
Philip.
And there's always like in like a cute child with big blue eyes going, you know, looking into the camera.
Yeah.
And then it says, Sophie might not live until she's 30. You know, there was all that kind of thing. And you know, so that you internalize that, and I thought, right, 30. All right, I've got 30 years. What am I going to do with 30 years? And then I started to get to like 28. I thought, oh, I'm doing pretty well. I think that was the point, like 28, where I thought, yeah, I'm going to live a bit longer than 30. And then I started to sort of think about this idea of zombie, which has become part of my practice. And when I reached 30, I said, that's when I declared myself as a zombie. But because I thought, how do you talk about this thing? Like, what's the language to talk about the idea of being alive when you're supposed to be dead?
Yeah.
Or living longer than you expected and having life? Because it really felt like 30, 30, 30, boom. Okay, beyond 30, it's like, all right, I shouldn't be here.
Result.
Fuck amazing.
You, world.
Yeah.
I'm winning.
Totally. But then also it was sort of, what is death now? Because before it was 30 was death. You know, you're going towards death, but it was death.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I don't know what it is. You know, I don't have it anymore. It's like it's behind me. Death is behind me. I've died and I'm still here, alive. All right, I'm a zombie. It's life and death together in one body. And also I love zombie films, the camp zombie films. So I liked that the zombie is a kind of playful and camp way of thinking about life and death and the politics of mortality. So it became a really interesting, playful figure. And, you know, I say I'm a zombie, but with my, you know, tongue in cheek.
Of course.
And, you know, playfully.
I know a few people who have sort of overcome cancer or other life-threatening diseases, or even cheated death, car accidents or whatnot. And you do come away from it with some sort of euphoric, almost like a superpower, for at least for a moment, that you're stronger than nature itself, you know.
Yes, I feel like they're zombies too, you know. I think like there's a whole bunch of zombies wandering the world. And leading up to that 30th birthday, because I thought, what am I going to do for to mark this thing? So I went, right, I have a friend who you know, they have those guardian property things where people move into buildings. I knew some people who lived in this one in Ladywell, and it was like an office block of a morgue, but the morgue was there too.
Shit.
But one day, when after they'd moved in, they walked around the house and they found a basket of keys, and you know, they tried all the keys on all the different doors, and one of them let them into the morgue. And I, you know, so I called them and I said, look, you know the story, and I'll be 30. For the 30 hours leading up to it, I want to spend it in the morgue.
Shit.
And they said, yeah, right, let's do it. So I got my friend, Sahel Merchant, who I've collaborated with a lot. He's an amazing filmmaker and a composer. And so I got him to come, and the two of us spent 30 hours in this morgue together.
Brilliant.
And on the hour, every hour, I would do a short performance action to camera, and he filmed it. So we had these 30 actions filmed. But the morgue was so weird. You went in, it was like one day they put down their tools and just left, because like the slabs were sticky. The stuff was not washed. instruments laying around. I was thinking, but it stunk, but it was amazing. So those 30 hours leading up to that, and then I thought, right, when it hits at midnight, I would just basically die, but I didn't. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and then we used those. That became a video installation that we did in Liverpool at St George's Hall for Dada Fest, which is a disability arts festival, and I used it for a sort of lecture performance that I did at Tate Britain as well a few years ago.
I mean, to be honest, if you would have killed over at 12 o'clock, that would have been so impressive, wouldn't it?
That would have been perfect in a way. Yeah, that would have been unbelievable. Yeah, and quite a lot for that moment. Quite a lot of people, you know, because it wasn't open to the public, wasn't a public performance, but you know, friends knew that I was doing it, and for that final 15 minutes, a lot of my friends arrived, and they were all like sat there in the room, like, all right, it's gonna die, it's gonna die,
your own existence.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that may even come into this question here, which is the piece that you've created that has got the strongest emotional connection.
Oh, wow, yeah. I think that's a hard to answer because it's like each one seems to, but that is a big one because of that, you know, that the significance of that time.
Yeah.
And then I'd say maybe the other one is the one I was talking about at the ICA, the Last Breath Society, because that was postponed for a year and a half or 2 years. And, you know, coming out of the lockdown, which is just horrible, you know, the COVID thing, and everybody coming to see this performance where they felt like they processed COVID, and it was 8 days, that performance, 4 hours a day for 8 days. So each day I would go home and come back, which is quite unusual for me. Most of my performances, however long they are, 30 hours, 20 hours, 10 hours, whatever, I'm in the space for the whole time. I don't leave the space, and that's the construct of the work. But this is that piece was the first time where I did it. It's 4 hours, I go home, 4 hours the next day, I go home.
And was it the same performance each day?
No, it was improvised, really. I had a set of tasks and rules. I had these coffins. I was basically moving the coffins around, stacking them, creating different images, getting on them, in them. So I was creating these sort of different tableaus and constructs with the coffins. But it was like there was a score for the day. But each day there was a sort of score, so it followed on from the previous day. But it was also, there was a lot of space for improvisation, which there always is in my performances. I depart from the score to, you know, do something that I feel needs to happen in the moment. So no, it stopped and it continued where it left off. So these little cycles, each day that built up a part of a wider cycle. So that was a pretty special thing, and that was a really emotional performance for me, actually, doing that fresh out of COVID, you know, and having everybody there. A lot of people started just crying in the audience, you could see, for the whole time. So you know, there was a big sort of, that was really charged,
emitting a lot of power. You
know, and then the other one, because it's so fresh in my mind, is the most recent performance that I did at the Whitechapel Gallery, which was, you know, one of my favorite ones that I've done, which is really it was such a big operation. I had a lot of other performers in it. Sheree was over for it, and you know, it felt like a huge opera, almost like a 4-hour opera.
Well, I've got to say, I was there for the first hour.
Oh, were you?
Yes. So I could only make the first hour, and well, I'm doing that with my hands because that's where I got up to, the bit where you was rocking in the coffin.
Yes.
That sounds like a name of a dodgy rock and roll song. I was rocking in the coffin, but you stood up in a coffin and tilting it left and right until it fell over.
Yes.
And I left a few moments after that. But you've mentioned Sheree Rose a few times.
Yes.
And there was a lot to take in as a viewer.
Yes.
But I have to say, Sheree Rose sitting in that rocking chair, doing absolutely nothing, just kept catching my eye. She looked sort of ghostly. She sometimes looked evil. She sometimes looked beautiful. She sometimes looked like a beautiful old that sounded a bit patronizing. She looked like a grandmother sitting in a rocking chair, or a psychopath sitting in a rocking chair, depending at what moment you looked at her. But yeah, it was it was a powerful thing. And you said about the coffins, the other performance is inside the coffins crawling about.
Yeah.
It was dark, and I didn't know the story of you. I tried not to read too much about it, so I can try and make sense of the story when I got there.
Sure. And you know, Sheree, I mean, she's incredible. She is a grandma. She's got 2 grandkids. She's 82 in a few days, and she is a legend. But the story is that she had full-time BDSM relationship with Bob. She was the mistress, he was a submissive, and you know, he was a masochist, so he really, pain was a big part of his sex and lifestyle as well that they did. And he died in 1996. But at the time he was 43, and that was one of, if not the oldest person with cystic fibrosis in the mid-90s. And he said that it was S&M that kept him alive as long as it did.
Brilliant.
So I connected with Sheree. I had a friend who was sort of a mentor to me. There's an artist called Ron Athey from LA, but he was living in London for a few years. He's gone back to LA now. But he was friends with Sheree from the 80s and 90s. And he said, well, connect with her if you want. And so I said, yeah, I'd love to. And I connected with her, and we started a conversation. And we did one performance together in 2011. And the idea for that was that it was my way of honoring that legacy. It was just supposed to be a one-off. It was a one-off where it's like, okay, I've got to address this legacy and this ghost of Bob Flanagan. Make this performance with Sheree. I invited her, and she was happy to do it. She'd stopped performing for many years, stopped doing things. So she came over. We had some funding, so we brought her over to London, and we did this one very short performance, 15 minutes performance, and it was a kind of new version of something she'd done with Bob years before. And the original thing that she'd done with Bob was a video called 100 Reasons, which was just a close-up of Bob's ass on the screen, and Sheree spanks his ass 100 times, so this paddle just comes in, and the artist Mike Kelly had written a sort of poem that were 100 different names for paddles. So after each spank, he would call out the name. And that was the piece. So Sheree and I just did a live sort of staging of it, where I was over her knee and she spanked me 100 times. And after each one, I would say, "Thank you, ma'am. Please may I have another?" That was the performance. It was, it was funny, and the audience counted as it went and things. But it's supposed to just be this honoring and a one-off. But we just, we just connected like that. And she said, "Oh, Martin, I don't think that I can go back to LA, and we can't just like stop. Something's happened." So, yeah, I agree. So she came up with an idea that sort of 30-day kind of performance, but a private performance, where in the morning, because she went back to LA, in the morning, she would send through a task for me to do, and I had the day to complete it, and I would have to document it and send the photos back to her in the evening. And so we did that, and that continued our collaboration, and meant that we continued talking, and we developed these different images that came out of it and ideas, and some were really funny and silly, and others were quite beautiful and tender, so a lot of things happened through that process. And then that just set us off then, right, what's the next performance, and since then we've done one, almost, apart from the COVID years, we've done one every year together, either in London or in LA or somewhere else.
Tell us about the performance that at the Whitechapel.
The idea for that, I had a whole group of other performers, but I've been thinking a lot about ideas of immortality. There's been so much about death and dying and mortality. I started to think about, right, how could I make a performance that sort of explores the possibility of continuation? And so I turned the space into a kind of, I call it like an ashen land, everything is like greys, whites, blacks with this color scheme. Everything was sort of pale and a little bit grey, and it was this world where it could have been life, it could have been death, it could have been an afterlife, it could be anything, and just these strange bodies doing these different actions. And the idea was that there was a sort of process that I would be going through during the performance, and Sheree, who was sat up on a platform and a rocking chair, as you've already said, at different points would come down and interrupt the process to perform different ritual actions on my body. So at one point I was laying on a stack of coffins, probably just after you left.
No, that was before.
Oh, you saw this. Oh, just before. Sorry,
Yeah.
just before. You know, and she came down and she washed my body as if it was a corpse with a sponge. She put a hot wax on my body. She would have put liquids down my throat to revive me through this kind of funnel, like a force feeding. So these different actions that would happen. Later on, I was kind of mummified to one of the pillars, and she flogged me with a flogger and bit my body. Took photos of the bite marks on this Polaroid camera. So these different times she came and sort of interrupted this ongoing process, but it was this process using coffins, using my body and exploring these possibilities of continuation, life, death. And the performance ended with this, I called him the perverted priest, comes in, and he's actually a piercer, so he's not a priest at all. But he put these sort of hooks, two in my back, two in each arm, and then I was suspended.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was the ending image, like, you know, like Christ, sort of crucifixion, and then lowered down, and Sheree sat underneath me, and then lowered down into her arms, and then the final image is like a pieta.
Oh, beautiful.
And me over her. So it's still, you know, quite Christian in its imagery, but so still
that's
inspired
exactly
by
what I was
that.
just looking at. Just as
They spell it here, but I'm still, you know, I'm not religious by it. I'm still inspired by I was brought up Catholic, of the images of martyrs and of suffering, which is so beautifully depicted in Christian iconography, and those are always sort of in my mind.
The reason that a lot of that is there is to make it easier for us to deal with our own passing and the passing of others, and, you know, and meeting these obstacles in life. And they work, don't they? From whatever book you decide to read.
And then departing from that, though, you think, oh, it's like everything, the rug's pulled away, you know. When I started figuring, no, I don't believe in it, around 1819, the same time that everything was happening, you know, I sort of, that's like, oh my God, death's just death, and I'm going to rot in the ground, or who knows what, you know. But it's like, what happens from being sure of something that's taken away, that story's taken away from you.
And how did it feel being suspended?
It feels, I've had it a couple of times before as well, where I've had a suspension, and it feels, it's not painful, but it feels extremely tight on your chest because your skin pulls really tight. And the thing that's the strangest, though, is it starts to pull, and then a certain time you're on your tiptoes, basically, just before you lift off the ground. That is the worst part for me, because it feels like, no, I don't want to go, it feels so unnatural just to be like leaving the ground. And then you lift, you're off, you know, and then you breathe, and actually it's not so bad, it's okay. And then you start to go up, and then you just hang, and if you breathe, and it's okay. It's not painful.
I should say that for the listener, I didn't see that happening at the time, but I've seen it before, only on telly. And it does feel like a very violent process at first, because it's so surreal. And then that bit, what you're saying, when they do come off the ground, when I first saw it, I was convinced that the skin was just going to be ripped off. But it's
that's the amazing thing. It feels, and you are panicked by that idea, but the skin doesn't snap, it stretches. So that, you know, you've got a long time before it's going to snap. It's going to stretch. You know, you can see people suspended with like other people suspended off of them, and other people suspended off. Like, your skin can take so much stretch and pull.
I presume it could be quite a spiritual happening.
In the performance, I guess it didn't really feel spiritual, because I was actually still thinking, like, performance mode is a weird mode of being like between completely losing yourself in the thing and also conscious of what's the image, where am I looking, where do I, you know, what does this look like, turn me around a bit, or, you know, whatever. So you're mixed. And at this moment, I looked down and my sister was in the audience, and I saw her, and she was like this. I thought, shit, she's gonna fucking faint.
Yeah.
And she does look like she's gonna faint. And I like beckoned to my assistant, go check on my sister, she's gonna faint. Oh, she had a proper go at me after. I wasn't gonna faint, and you just got everybody looking at me, felt like a rat tit.
But what did she think of it when she saw? What did she say when she saw you leaving the ground?
Oh, she loved it. Yeah, she loved it. She's been to many of my performances. She's assisted me in some of them, and she's a nurse. Actually, she's a nurse. So,
There's some bit of
but
irony there, isn't there?
yeah, I know, totally. Yeah,
Brilliant.
Her story is an amazing story, actually, because she's 5 years younger than me, and she was the first person in the world to be born using this process to stop her having cystic fibrosis.
Oh, great. Did they take the gene from the sperm?
Yeah, so it was a type of test tube baby, but one that had like a kind of gene.
Yeah.
I can't remember what I should have looked what it was called. If I knew what I was talking about, I would have. But it's a particular process that was done, which is a kind of like gene.
How bonkers! How bonkers is it that they can do that? Seriously,
unbelievable. Yeah, it's unbelievable
that they can take a gene, and I don't know if it is from the sperm or from the egg, but
yes.
A couple of years ago, my son got diagnosed with a rare genetic cancer that my wife didn't know that she had. It sort of bypassed her, and it's only been at the time that this cancer was only 15 years old in medical terms, you know.
Wow.
In the last few years, they've said to him they can do that, what happened to your parents to him, so that when he wants to have children, they do that same process. They can extract the gene, break in the chain. It's fucking amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. So it's probably Chloe it's probably the same thing. So she was the first person to have that.
And hats off to, well done to your sister.
It was Professor Robert Winston. You might remember him. He was always on TV during the 90s. He was on TV about everything. He was the one that did it.
Brilliant.
So she always says that she always makes a joke that Professor Winston's her dad, not my dad. Well, you're not my real dad. Professor Winston is.
Brilliant. So the performance happened, was it the end of July, start of August?
Yeah, end of July, yeah. It was 22nd of July. So then it's so exhausting after, because you do that week leading up to it is utter chaos, where you're working 12, 15 hours each day, getting everything ready and set up, and then you've got to do like the most intense performance, this 4-hour epic, physically, exhausting performance. So then after that, boom, you die. For a couple of weeks you die.
I can imagine.
Recover and rest, and you can't really do anything, just sleeping a lot, trotting around, but slowly.
Yeah.
And,
just before I talk about what is coming up for you, there's another question that I ask each guest, and that is, if there was you and 5 other artists, past and present, what would your ideal group show performance be?
Wow. Well, I definitely have to say Bob Flanagan and Sheree Rose. That's definitely clear. I would say David Wojnarowicz. David Wojnarowicz was an artist who died of HIV, AIDS related complications, and he was like very important artist for the like very political AIDS-based work in the 90s, and he worked through writing and collage and video and a whole range of different kind of media, but like very political, and a lot of activist stuff. So he was involved in ACT UP as well.
Yeah. Oh, good. That's a name. I'll go and look that one up. Cheers.
Yeah, in New York, he was a New York artist, and the work, I mean, it's utterly like soul destroying work, so beautiful. He's definitely one of the big influences on me for sure. I'd say Frida Kahlo. Those images, those kind of self-portraits of her in different guises, I find so beautiful and moving, and just opening up this kind of conversation around disability and kind of pain.
Yeah.
through a single image. It's so stunning.
Both the subjects and the visuals, they could have been created last week, couldn't they?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, agreed. I would also say then I'd have to say Ron Athey, who was a big mentor to me.
Yeah.
Amazing performance artist. And so what's that? Bob Flanagan,
Well,
Bob and Sheree. Bob and
them
Sheree
two
counts.
they can be as one, can't
They
they?
can be as one. Bob and Sheree, David Wojnarowicz, Frida Kahlo, Ron Athey, and fifth one, I would say I would say Hannah Wilkie.
Okay. I don't know that name either.
Yeah, she does. Well, she was an amazing artist, and she did like a lot of work that was really like, she was beautiful in a very kind of typical way, and she did a lot of like pornographic imagery, and it got really slated by sex negative feminists.
Yeah.
But interestingly, the view on her really changed when she got diagnosed with cancer.
Okay.
So she was diagnosed with cancer, she was dying, and she continued making the same images, but as her body got frailer and frailer, she continued doing these like very
It's
sexualized
completely
images.
different language, yeah.
Yes, and people's attitudes towards the work changed, but she was staging. She said it's the same thing, but there's this other politic in it as well around illness and dying.
And done your performance in end of July at the Whitechapel Gallery.
Yeah.
And are you yet writer in residence, or you're going to be writer in residence?
I am writer in residence, yeah. So it's for this full year, January through to December of this year I've been at. So and as part of that, I do 3 performances. The first one was May. That was a smaller one. Then the big main one, that was in July in the gallery. And then December, there's going to be the third one, which will be a slightly smaller one. But each one involves the texts across the 3 of them, writing, and I'm thinking of them as a kind of trilogy. They stand alone, but they do relate to one another as well. So the images from that second one that you saw kind of came out of the first one, and the making and the writing in the first one. And that helped me to develop the sort of visuals for the second one. And again, now that's coming through, and some of the images that came out of that are starting to take place for this third one as well.
And being a writer in residence, did you write these performances during that year?
Yes, I did. Yeah, exactly. So I started, the first performance was May, and I started in January. My process, like part of it is writing, and part of it is other stuff as well, and like sort of physical construction of imagery. So the first performance was shorter one. It's like just a 1-hour performance where everybody sits and watches for an hour. It's not durational. That was just in the cinema space in Whitechapel, so it's a different kind of space. And for that, we had most of the like physical intense actions had been filmed. We filmed it in a crypt in London. Yeah, so that was just a shorter performance, and I'd kind of written this story of a man who's obsessed with death, and he makes a pact with the Grim Reaper to live forever. And so it sort of follows his life through these different ages and generations, and through these different kinds of worlds and lives, and times where he should die but doesn't die, like he drowns but he never dies, he just continues drowning, and then he sees the demise of the world until he's the final person. It becomes this kind of apocalyptic landscape where he's just existing with nothing around him. So sort of chart has that story which I read through the performance in different segments throughout, and then some live actions that I do, and the video projection of this stuff that was shot in the crypt plays as well throughout, these different things that kind of echo the story. They don't tell the story, but they're the actions that kind of relate to the story and tell elements of the story. So that was the first one. The second one was the piece that you saw that we already talked about. And then the third one, which is coming up, is going to be it's still unclear because I'm like making it right now. I'm just at the start of the process of making it, basically.
Has it got a title yet?
I think the word transmissions is going to be in it, because part of the thing of it is that it's a kind of radio show from the afterlife. It's part of the kind of conceit of it. So I think there's going to be an element where people can listen from home, tune in like it's a radio show. It's like a hospital radio show from the afterlife. But there will be a live thing in the gallery that people can come and watch as well, to watch the kind of recording of it. But it's not fully just a radio show. There is a sort of live performance element going on, which you don't get through the radio. So there's like two different ways of experiencing it. And I've been obsessed. I love the radio. I've been obsessed with radio for a long time, all day long. I don't have a TV at my house. I just listen to the radio.
Brilliant. When is this show in December? Has it got a date yet?
Yeah, it's the 14th of December. It hasn't been officially announced yet, though. We don't have all the elements, but I guess it will probably be released properly in October or sometime.
Oh, so you're a writer in residence.
Yeah.
What happens to your writings at the end of this year? Are they yours or are they the gallery's?
They're mine, but they go onto the Whitechapel's website, so that there's like one piece of writing from each performance that goes onto the website. So the story from the first one, you can go on now and read if you want on the Whitechapel, and then the texts that I read during the performance you saw, they're up there now as well, and then something from the third one will go up as well.
And Martin, where can anyone find what you're doing, be it website or social media?
Yes, probably the best, most up-to-date one is Instagram, Martin O'Brien Art.
Brilliant. I think that's all my questions are. So, Martin, thank you very much for your time. I've absolutely
It was a pleasure. It was so much fun chatting with you.
All the
Bye.
best. Ta-da.
Bye.
Brilliant. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. It's a podcast that's produced with the help of the listener. And if you like what you've heard and you think you might be able to give a little support, there's two ways in which you can do it. If you go over to the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile, you'll find a Linktree drop-down box. And in that box, you'll find two links. One is called Buy Us a Coffee, and it's pretty much that. You can make a one-off payment, the price of a cup of coffee. Or, if you're able and want to do it more long-term, you can become a Ministry of Arts Patreon, where you can sign up to support us on a monthly basis. And 100% of your support goes back into the podcast. And if you're not able to do that, that's absolutely fine. This content is free for everyone. But we would urge you to follow us on your socials and show us a bit of love that way. Either way, thanks for listening and see you next time. Ta-da.